Peace, and welcome. We're glad you're here. This is the Cook on Monday Morning podcast, and I'm here with my homegirl, Tyra Fennell.
Yeah.
Welcome.
We're here.
Welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's the day after Christmas, so I'm kind of like a little sleepy still, but I'm good.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the other day, like how we actually met, because I know you've been in the city for how long now?
I know how we met.
Okay, what happened?
Okay, so we met because we were both new leaders council, first of all. So we were in the same community of young emerging leadership. And then the convention in Sacramento was happening. And Kate Mader suggested you carpool with me to Sacramento.
Okay.
So we kind of, I think, knew of each other through New Leaders Council, but then we did that road trip.
Yeah, I think that's when we first had a conversation, but I think I met you at a Super Bowl party in the Fillmore.
Oh, the Super Bowl party was scandalous. We can't talk about the Super Bowl party on camera. That's too scandalous. But it was good. It was interesting.
Yeah. Well, in the short time you've been here, you made like an immediate impression, and I was thinking about just how great you are at making an impression, and everyone that you're so charming, everyone that meets you, I think really likes you.
Do they?
I mean, my family does. I was talking.
Your family's great.
My family, every Christmas they're like, "Where's Tyra?"
His family's a selling point, ladies.
Tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
Yeah. So I am not a native San Franciscan. I am from Washington, D.C. I'm very proud to be from Washington, D.C. And I grew up part of the time on Capitol Hill and then part of the time in an area called Columbia Heights. And I grew up in Washington, D.C. when it was still really chocolate city. And I also grew up in Washington, D.C. at the height of the crack epidemic. So both of those things had a huge impact on how I see life and how I move through life.
Were you growing up in D.C. when Marion Barry was mayor?
Definitely. Marion Barry, I know for people that aren't from D.C., he's like our Willie Brown, except for Willie Brown did not smoke crack. But he was still like our mayor for life. Because Marion Barry essentially created the Black middle class in D.C., which many people outside of D.C. or who are not Black don't really appreciate that. But he basically gave a lot of Black people their jobs in government, which helped elevate them economically. So a lot of my dad, my sister, even myself, because he created the Summer Youth Employment Program. So because of that program, I got to do arts performances every summer and get paid for it. So he really elevated the Black socioeconomic strata in DC. Yeah,
the arts too. The impression you made on San Francisco is definitely in the space of the arts and in politics. And I was wondering a little bit about your political roots. So I know Marion Barry must have made an impression on you. What were your parents like? What was your upbringing like?
So my parents have a very old school story because they grew up together. They met when they were like 5 and they lived around the corner from each other. And it was a whole story of my mom always loved my dad. My dad didn't like my mom until he got drafted to the Vietnam War. And she went to college in Alabama. And then she would write him letters. And she said slowly his letters turned to love letters. And she'd always liked him. So she was shocked. And then when they both got back to DC, they just got married. So it was like one of those, like 21. So very old school story. They were married for 47 years before he passed away. And so I grew up around the corner from both sets of grandparents. I never had babysitters. I never had boxed food for dinner. I always had homemade meals. So very traditional family nucleus.
Okay. And who would you say you take more after, your mom or your dad, or neither, or what?
My fashion sense, my dad.
Okay.
Definitely. And my mom, probably majority, except for the crazy part. That I hope I kind of do have a little of that. But she's extremely smart. She's extremely political, though she will not say that. She says she hates politics. But she grew up, she worked in the Office of Civil Rights and Department of Education with Clarence Thomas when he was, and so she got to work with him during her time at Civil Rights. And let's put it this way, she didn't feel Anita Hill was lying. And then she moved on to work in policy. Obviously, she had to implement No Child Left Behind, which she had a lot of issues with, but she worked on national education policy. And through her work and, her doing events at the press club and things like that, kind of got me introduced to the world of politics in a roundabout way, though she would never call herself a politician, ever. She's not into it.
Yeah, yeah. And you went to Howard.
I went to Howard. I'm actually a legacy student because I'm third generation Howard University.
Oh.
And I went to grad school. So it's a very different experience than undergrad, but I definitely have like HU under my belt.
Okay. Talk a little bit about what Howard was like. I mean, it sounds like you always knew you were going to go, or is that the case or not?
Yeah, well, I'm from DC, so I had the Chocolate City experience. So my advice to any young person is if you grew up in a predominantly Black environment, you don't really need the HBCU experience in undergrad. It's probably good you get the opposite experience just to be, just have a diverse experience. But if you're a Black kid that grew up in Iowa or predominantly white areas, then I think an HBCU is amazing because it does really instill self-esteem and affirmation. Like, it's an amazing experience. And I feel like at some point, either undergrad or grad, every Black child should experience an HBCU.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if it's like a semester at the school or whatever, but yeah.
How does the school accomplish that? Or how would you say they go about doing that?
I think if you're not from a concentrated area with Black excellence, like I'll give you examples, San Francisco. Mm-hmm. San Francisco, not of yesteryear, because I think it was a bit better, probably when you were growing up, right?
Right.
But now, when I moved here like 10 years ago, I've always lived in cities with progressive Black populations. I've lived in London. I lived in New York, DC. Large Black populations of all types of Black people, rich, poor, professors, drug addicts, you name it. Mm-hmm. Here, when I moved to San Francisco, I lived in Coal Valley, and I would go to work every day downtown, and I would just see homeless people or very under the underclass. And it caused me to become depressed without me even being aware of what was going on until maybe 7 months later. And I was like, where are all the Black middle class people? And they're certainly here. They're just not concentrated. So what an HBCU does essentially for someone that comes from an experience like that is it concentrates all this Black excellence in one body where you're walking around every day seeing these amazing thinkers, artists, just people, and you're absorbing that. So that's what an HBCU does essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you're referring to the news report that came out sometime within the last few months about 40% of the 40% of the homeless population in the city is African American.
Right.
And so a large percentage of who you see who have housing insecurity or suffering on the streets are African American.
Right. And I'll since we're going to lead into San Francisco politics, I'll just give you this thought of mine. I feel like it's affects the way people treat Black people and perceive Black people, even Black people. So, example, I consider myself probably in the bourgeoisie class of Black life.
But you intermingle with.
I intermingle, so I'm not Marxist in the sense where I only deal with the middle class. So that's true, but that's how I'm perceived. And I feel like talking about Black people. I feel like Black people, a lot of times in this city, are more okay with digesting the narrative of a Black person coming from poverty, the projects coming out of that, than a Black person that steps into their power from a position of privilege. Mm-hmm. And so that is some of the ways subconsciously only seeing Black poverty affects our mentality. The way it affects other ethnicities in the city is when they meet you, they just assume you come from poverty. And that's not good either because they're always moving at you from like you're moving in a deficit.
Right.
So HBCUs essentially sort of help reverse that in a young person's ether. Like the young person goes there and starts realizing, wait a minute, all that I am is not the projects or poverty or subsidized housing. I'm also this and that and this and that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's embraced, it's normalized, it's expected. You build a community of people that want to push you toward excellence. And it was interesting because on the first podcast, my first guest was from Jamaica, and I talked about a lot of what you were mentioning when it came to this deficit mindset and how I didn't see that in Jamaica because there was like everybody owned every aspect of, you walk into the bank, it's all run by Black people.
Right.
You walk into Chinese food restaurants and it's all Black people working there.
Right.
It's just like the whole country.
It's very different.
Yeah. It's like you don't have to be relegated to a particular type of career You meet people that have a lot of different professions who look like you.
Right.
And it sounds like the HBCU experience also offers that
Totally.
to people.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. But you have really, we mentioned the arts, and talk a little bit about your career in the arts, how it started, what it looks like now.
Mm-hmm. So my father this is nothing against my father. So he's a very urbane guy. For a Black man brought up in the 60s and 70s, he was kind of atypical. He's very much into alternative jazz, like fusion, John Zorn, Coltrane, 70s Coltrane, 70s, 80s Miles Davis, just into very avant-garde music, abstract art. So growing up, he would take me to concerts, little holes in the walls where it would just be like music was like chaos. I didn't know what was going on. He would, those Carlos Rossi bottles of wine, those like gallon jugs of wine. You'll see them.
Oh, Ross. Okay. Yeah.
So his favorite thing to do was to take a bottle of that wine in the basement and just listening to it was jazz, but it was fusion. So it was like really chaotic. And he just liked doing that. So he took me to the Kennedy Center to see a Kronos String Quartet. And Kronos is neoclassical, so they play like Hendrix and things like that. And that really, I was like 6, I think, and that impacted me forever. That was like, and the cellist was a woman. And so the next week or so, I went to the DC Youth Orchestra and I registered to play cello. So that's how I started in music, playing cello with the DC Youth Orchestra.
I actually didn't know that you played an instrument.
Yeah. And then when I got to the 9th grade, I applied for Duke Ellington School of the Arts, which is an arts magnet school in DC. And it was either continue playing cello or do something else. And I didn't feel like I was going to be a classical musician. I just, So I applied for Duke Ellington as a literary arts major, which essentially means I wanted to be some sort of writer, movie producer, or something like that in the media arts. But my first year in, I used to sing with these girls and we called ourselves Shades of Ebony. It's really bad.
Oh, wow.
But we would do like club gigs. We would do backup singing. And one day I was singing in the hallway and the choir director said, "Oh, I didn't know you could sing, Tyra. Why aren't you in the music department?" And I was like, "I'm in the media department." So they somehow spliced a double major together.
This is high school.
This is high school. Okay. So I would do media arts, writing, and then I would do singing. And we would go on tours and everything. And I was in Dreamgirls. That was like the biggest thing I did in music in high school because I was Dina, which is a star, Dreamgirls. And that kind of how my career continued. I moved to England. I was a songwriter. So that kind of morphed into being a professional songwriter and singer. So sometimes I'd write the songs, sometimes I'd perform the songs. And I actually got to perform at some pretty major events in England. And that was pretty much my 20s. So yeah, that's my foundation. And my foundation in the arts is music. Okay. Yeah.
I didn't know that you can sing until you start singing at our Christmas party. Yeah.
Christmas party.
We was doing like a singing competition between the guys and the girls. And Tyra organized all the women in my family to be her backup singers. And then she starts singing, and it's like angelic. Like, you have a really beautiful voice.
Yeah, thank you. We had like dance moves and everything. It was
good. Yeah. It was that coordinated dance moves. Yeah. But I didn't know that you were touring with a musical. That's dope.
That was in my 12th grade year of high school. But it was an upset because that role is really, if you know Dreamgirls, it's a very difficult musical to sing. And Dina is supposed to be Diana Ross, so she's the lead. So that was a big deal. And that actually gave me the confidence to apply to music school for college. Yeah. Because I still didn't see myself as a singer. And I really never did. That's why I morphed into more production, which I do now. Right. Because I could sing, but I was more of a business person and I was more of just a hard worker. So I knew I was never going to be like Beyonce. Okay, like she has it. And there are people out there that have it and all they want to do is art, right? I wasn't that person. So I took some life inventory at 28 and I was like, okay, no, you gotta figure out how to remove all this stuff around. Yeah. And that's how I got to know you really was as a person that was enterprising, that made things happen, that pulled people together and that, manifested ideas, which I truly appreciate about you. So I saw that you doing that at different iterations. And then it happened in a large way through Bayview Live. Yeah. And so talk a little bit about Bayview Live, what that is. Yeah. So basically, when I moved to San Francisco, I got a job at the Arts Commission. And the Arts Commission's job is to do things citywide around arts policy, re-granting, grant making, and that's largely their role. So I was kind of out of place in that position. I'm not a slow mover. I move very fast. I move at a private sector pace, and the Arts Commission is government, can be slow.
Mm-hmm.
And I was introduced to the Bayview through my work at the Arts Commission and realized that the resources they were given by the city for arts production and arts vitalization was too small for the overwhelming perception people had of Bayview, meaning Bayview has had a bit of a history of violence in the community, of all sorts of things for a number of reasons. So people in the neighborhood are still a little nervous to come to the commercial corridor, let alone people outside the neighborhood. And what that causes is a huge economic deficit. People don't want to patronize the businesses or the restaurants. So there's a lot of attrition. And so you need a flow of foot traffic for the businesses to thrive. And a $5,000 event is not going to work. That's not going to bring people out. And so I decided to actually, after producing Third on Third at the Arts Commission, where I had to really bootstrap.
I forgot about Third on Third, yeah.
One, I didn't like that because I created that within the city owned the concept.
Yeah.
So that
what's Third on Third? What was Third on Third?
Third on Third, the initial concept was supposed to happen every third Thursday of the month. And I was so impressed by First Fridays in Oakland that I modeled it after that.
Mm-hmm.
So the third Thursday of every month, something was supposed to happen in the Bayview throughout the corridor, and every merchant site, they'd have art. And then on Mendel Plaza, they'd have the crux of the activation. Maybe Los Rocas performed one time. I was there, and so forth and so on. So one, the city owned the idea. Two, because I work for the city, they didn't want me to produce it. So they actually granted the money to the Opera House to do it. And
the Bayview Opera House?
Yeah. And Barbara from the Opera House is amazing, but it wasn't me. And it wasn't my vision. So that really upset me. And that's what made me start thinking about moving out of that and starting my own organization so I can really be more nimble. And I knew Bayview needed to be a Black cultural district. And I knew they needed a major festival. They're the only neighborhood in the city that doesn't have its own major festival. And that's where Bayview Live was created.
Yeah. So what's Bayview Live?
So Bayview Live is the only festival in San Francisco solely dedicated to urban music, which is a euphemism for Black music. But Black music is all music. So we can get into that later. But essentially, it's a platform for the neighborhood artists to perform, as well as culturally relevant artists from around the country, that are internationally known, to come and perform in the Bayview.
Right.
And so that's essentially what Bayview Live is.
Yeah. We were talking a lot around the first Bayview Live, and the headliner was
Jidenna. Before he was really, he had Classic Man out.
Right.
But I could still get him on the cheap because it was before his first full album came out. But he had made. See, artists are like the stock market. You got to get them right before they hit or the album hits. So we got him at a good spot. And you at the time, thank God, I just needed partners. And Mission Bit came in and was a partner. And nobody really believed in Bayview Live and Imprint.City. Supervisor Cohen did. And she believes in me in every, like Third on Third, she funded Bayview Live. So she's always been a believer. So.
Yeah. Supervisor Malia Cohen was a former supervisor of District 10.
Right.
She's now the Board of Equalization.
Right. Chair.
Yeah. For the state of California. Yeah. And I think, for me, at least, observing you is kind of hard not to bet on you, which was why I wanted to be a part of Bayview Live. Yeah. And then you got this, there's this thing that happens too, where if you get a recording artist to do something, it validates the event in a different way. It's
like the analogy I give, which I'm sure a lot of progressive San Franciscans will hate this analogy, but it's like certain artists are like the Target or the Starbucks of the art world, meaning if they're performing in that neighborhood, people tend to feel safe in that neighborhood. So Jidenna or Talib Kweli, it's like if they perform in the neighborhood, it must be okay. And then people come out and realize it is okay, and then they come back.
Right.
And if your product is good, they'll come back.
Right.
So that was my idea. And also these artists, these headliners, are the Trojan horses for our neighborhood artists. Unfortunately, if you're trying to attract thousands of people, maybe the neighborhood rapper who's very talented can't draw that number. But Busta Rhymes can. And then what you do is you have the artist in the neighborhood and locally go on before him.
Right.
So that's kind of the concept.
Yeah. So you leverage the national recording artists to put on the local artists, and you give them all the space to shine. Right. Which I think is like the true brilliance of like your leadership. And I think it's always been about, how do you make multiple pieces work and then always put on the community.
Right.
in a very real way, especially around the arts. But not even just the arts, but the local vendors can come on.
Right.
Like everyone is benefiting. Everyone can eat.
Right.
If Tyra's running the
and
show.
the youth are helping out during the event. They're being paid to like work the event. They're being paid. We're creating a mural art area where the festival lives, and the youth help the artists paint the mural. So everyone does get paid. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is it is expensive, and sometimes I don't get paid. So we're still growing Baby Live. My hope is that the future, it'll just be like this huge thing in the neighborhood that supports the local economy. So I'm willing to take an L for the first few years, but that's how business works anyway.
Yeah. Baby Live is a signature event of Imprint.City, which is the organization that you founded.
Right.
And we can get into a ton of stories about what it's like to start a nonprofit or like build a nonprofit, because I went through that too. But I want to keep going on the other people that have participated in as a headliner. So you had Jadena the first year.
Jadena was the first year. He was excellent. And I was kind of new at doing it. So he was like really the only big act. I had Equipto perform, who was like opener for Jadena.
He's a local artist.
He's a local artist. And then the next year we had Talib Kweli, who I'm an OG. So I love Talib. I know the history, and he attracted a lot of OGs, but the young people didn't know who he was. So I got Neff the Pharaoh to open.
Oh, right. Yeah. From Vallejo.
Yeah. Then the next year we wanted to really pay an homage to female artists. So the entire stage were female artists. Okay. And that's when Kamaya headlined, and Rayana J. Performed, and amongst others. So Vicious is a local artist in Bayview, rapper. She performed, so forth and so on.
We went to high school together.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And then last year's our 4th annual. That was Busta Rhymes and Prezi, who's from Hunters Point, opened for Busta Rhymes, as well as Stunna Man, who's the last Black man in San Francisco, as well as Jamal Truelove performed. And then we had an after party. So this is the first year we had an after party, and we had all sorts of people, local artists performed. It was cracking.
Okay. So, where was the after party?
That was at Laughing Monk Brewing. So when it starts getting cold, everyone could move inside.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. What street is Baby Live on again?
Baby Live is on Egbert Avenue between 3rd and Jennings.
Okay. Yeah. I know about Busta Rhymes' reputation about being an incredible performer.
Oh, Busta Rhymes.
Yeah. Yeah. But, when Talib came, I always want you to win, but I'm not really a big Talib fan. I think that like his voice is kind of annoying.
Oh, so, Talib. Can I tell you? Okay, so Busta Rhymes. So let's talk about the juxtaposition between artists. Talib Kweli was such a nice man.
Okay.
And they're all talented. Such a nice man. Busta Rhymes is the first time I worked with a superstar, like with all that comes with that. And so he was a little more to handle, but when he got out of his car, we finally got him out the car.
Oh, what's the story?
Well, the thing is, people were like, people have no idea what goes on when you're producing stuff. I was dealing with so much chaos that day, and people were coming up to me, and I was like, I don't have no time. I'm trying to make sure Busta Rhymes has his food right. He wants Jamaican food. Shout out to Kingston 11 for catering, because I was like, where you get Jamaican food in San Francisco? And so we had his food right. Then we had him perform for 45 minutes, and I'm only performing for 30 minutes. So he wouldn't come into the venue until I went on Instagram and changed it. The problem is my graphic designer, it was a Saturday, so he wasn't around. So I did literally do it on PowerPoint. It was ridiculous. But finally he gets out the car, and the crowd went wild. He was excellent. He was worth, it was like giving birth. Like it was so much pain, and then when you get the baby, you're like, yes. So he was excellent.
Yeah.
And the neighborhood's never gonna forget that. And it was the first time he performed in the Bay Area in like 20 years.
Wow, you bought Busta Rhymes to the baby. Yeah. There was like that song you had with Janet Jackson when I was in high school. And they had the little water music video. Yeah.
He's an OG too. So that's why we got Prezi. Because Prezi is the younger artist, and he's from the neighborhood. So that was really nice.
Yeah. Do you know who's performing in the coming year? You got somebody
No,
booked yet?
See, the issue with Baby Live right now is that I'm always chasing the train. So right now I have to raise money. And then by the time I get the money, sometimes it's late in the tour season. So I'm kind of left pulling from, scraps, so to speak.
Okay.
So I'm hoping to raise the money a little earlier so I have more variety of who I should get. But this year we're trying to go for more of a Black Future theme, I think, which is more like Duckworth, kind of Anderson .Paak or just a little more Afro punk.
Okay.
So that's the theme we're kind of thinking this year. We also were thinking of doing a Bayview Bounce edition with like Big Frida and that whole energy. So we're grappling with like what theme we're going to do this year.
Yeah. I think it's a good time for events focused on the Black community. Like what you do in Bayview is great. This year I went to the, what is it, Afrotech?
Yes.
I checked that out, and there was a lot of people from, I didn't really go to any of the workshops. Right. I was just kind of looking at the scene. Yeah, I was just kind of watching people, and there's more and more things like that popping up, and so I hope that it continues to build traction. I'm sure it will with you at the helm.
Yeah.
So hopefully, is there like a newsletter people can sign up for to hear about that?
So if you go to Imprint.City.org, you can sign up for our newsletter, and we put out quality, so we won't be loading with a lot of crap, but it keeps you in the loop on all the events. We do about 10 to 12 events a year.
Okay.
So it keeps you in the loop on the events that we're doing and the artists that we're trying to put on, because we have a lot of great artists in the Bayview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're also running for office right now.
I'm running for the DCCC, the Democratic County Central Committee. And people are like, why are you running for office? Well, first of all, because
what is the DCCC?
DCCC basically is a tentacle of the Democratic Party in California and essentially National Democratic Party. So the way it's structured is every jurisdiction has a body called the DCCC that feeds into the larger structure of the California Democratic Party. And our job is to register voters, to endorse candidates, and to help strengthen the party platform through different things, through resolutions. Okay.
Yeah, and you make endorsements on local
candidates. Yeah. And also we do influence, like we go to the conventions and we can vote on like presidential nominees and legislation on a larger scale. So that's just some of the highlights.
Yeah. As a person that ran for Board of Education twice, like the first year I didn't get the DCCC endorsement. I lost by like less than 1% of the vote. Ooh. The second year I did get the DCCC endorsement, and I was the third place vote getter. I won the race, but the gap between me and everybody else was like 50,000 votes.
So they have an impact. They had an impact.
They have a huge impact on what they consider low ballot races.
Right.
So last year was kind of odd because for the school board race, two people got the DCCC, and one that didn't get it. It was like very, very abnormal.
Right.
Like Gabriela Lopez didn't get the DCCC, but she ended up coming second place as a vote getter, which is very unusual.
Right.
But people don't really. I think a lot of San Francisco residents don't. They don't really know who's on the DCCC. They see endorsed by the Democratic Party, and they'll follow that slate because like, I'm a Democrat. I'm gonna take that into the ballot. But there's been some things that you brought up around the way that the race is going and who's running that I wanted you to speak to.
So I know politics is always like, you have them and they, like us and them. And in San Francisco is no different. The funny thing about San Francisco from a Washingtonian perspective is that they're kind of similar. But they figured out a way to divide themselves into what they call progressives and moderates. So right now, there are a lot of elected supervisors that are running for the DCCC on what is called the progressive, quote unquote, side. And that's problematic to me because the DCCC essentially should be a body of emerging thinkers, grassroots activists to create a check and balance from the long arm of City Hall. So you don't want elected supervisors on the DCCC to endorse their friends, endorse themselves for office. And also you can raise money through the DCCC to fund other races. So you could essentially use it as a slush fund if you're a sitting elected official. So I'm all for, if you're formally elected or if you're a grassroots activist specifically running for the DCCC, it helps cultivate new leadership and new thinkers. But if you're sitting in elected office and you have the job of a supervisor, which right now they need to focus totally on that because the city is kind of has some big issues, then you should do that job and allow the DCCC to be a mechanism for the next generation, so to speak.
Right. Yeah, let's get into a few of the San Francisco issues.
Oh, okay.
And I do want to talk about this thing around, I want to talk about the stuff about politics. But before I get into that, what do you consider the most pressing issues facing the city?
Affordable housing.
Okay.
The affordable housing to me has impacted the homeless population. I think the homeless population is at 17% and has increased significantly over 2 years. The housing crisis starting in 2008 in terms of Black life has significantly caused a transference of wealth in the Black community, which feeds into the homeless population. For the larger San Francisco, not being able to afford a place to live, a lot of people have decided to live in their cars, live in their RVs. So affordable housing really spills into a lot of different areas. So I would say that's probably the most pressing issue.
And how would you evaluate the city's ability right now to solve that problem?
Well, it's not really that great, only because the laws and the legislation that's in place currently causes a lot of housing can only be built at a snail's pace. There's a lot of red tape that discourages not big developers. I mean, people think of development, they think Forest City or, 5 Point. They don't think of mid-range and mom and pop developers. And our legislation and our NIMBYism is largely affecting the smaller developers' ability to come in and support housing in San Francisco. And so I think that's an issue. All the red tape costs a lot of money. It also prevents people that have vacant. They have a vacancy tax coming down the pipeline. As someone that supports small business owners, I think the vacancy tax is good in its spirit. But I think that before you can impose a penalty to people that may not have the ability to pay for a remediation of their space because it's so expensive, you need to streamline the permitting process and how much it costs to actually get your space remediated.
Yeah. I definitely agree with the point about our policies affecting the small and mid-range developers or people who really want to do business with the city or do business, not with the city, but in the city. It takes about a year to get through permitting for any sort of like housing change. If you want to, add a floor or remodel a kitchen and so if you're the bigger developer, like you say, you have really long money to wait out that process.
30 years is how much it takes to really see a return on investment for development.
Okay.
So if you're Forest City and you develop Times Square, you have that bandwidth. Right.
But if you may be up and coming or starting Black developer looking to do business in the city and you don't have that type of backing or capital, we've been trying to do it at the school district, we have a goal now. We're trying to create a policy around building 550 units, which I think should be more, but looking at district property as a place to build housing for educators.
Right.
And as we look through who can do that in the most effective way, there's been a lot of conversations about bringing in nonprofit developers to do the work. But the big constraint is that they need city money in order to finance the projects. And the city is really constrained because our county, the school district is a separate jurisdiction from the city and county of San Francisco. And the city has a bunch of housing demands. And so us waiting on the city to give us money for our jurisdiction is like, it really...
I mean, if I was having an issue with the Arts Commission, that's a microcosm of like this bigger issue. I mean, if I was dealing with the snail's pace of the small little Arts Commission, imagine dealing with the mammoth of changing housing policy that can make building more efficient, which is what the mayor is going up against right now, figuring out how to manage the market rate side of housing, which essentially funds the below market rate side of housing, and then also make it and include a broad range of people that need housing, middle income, low income, so forth and so on.
Right. Yeah. And the debate around housing, it really is interesting because like my grandmother, right? The home that she lives in, her father bought in 1947. Wow. And they bought it for like $6,000.
Why did you have to tell me that? That's every time I hear those figures.
Right. Well, they bought that house and the house behind it. And, it's in Hayes Valley, which is one of the most expensive, which is where we are now, one of the most expensive places in the city to live. And at that time, it was redlined. So, it was redlined by the federal government. So banks weren't lending to people that lived in their neighborhood because it was considered a blighted neighborhood because they had Black residents there. So gentrification, I mean, it's been a big story in San Francisco. But if you talk to her, like she is a, not in my backyard person. And it's primarily because the density of the city and the changing diversity of the city is really, she's one of these people. I think it's like a lot of long-term residents that seeing the city change, they want to put constraints on the amount of building. But when that happens, everyone, as a result, if they live in the right area, their property value goes up, but it puts a lot more, it makes it a lot harder to build in San Francisco.
Right. Right.
And so it's harder for people to actually have affordable housing because we don't have more housing in general. So,
Right.
the demand
Well, we
is really
also
low.
need the west side to step up a little bit.
Mhm.
The southeast side of the city, which includes Hayes Valley, District 5, has taken the lion's share of development. And so is creating a lopsided city.
Mhm.
That includes navigation centers and transitional housing. We know there's a lot of wealth on the west side. We know there's a lot of single family homes on the west side, which makes it difficult. And there's not political will because those wealthy people give to campaigns.
Mhm.
But we do need to start looking holistically, not only at the city and getting the west side to do their fair share, but also regionally. Regional housing and a regional housing plan and liaising with San Jose and Oakland is very critical. And also that leads to the transportation issue. Because if you're going to have people moving out further, whether it's the west side or Oakland, the transportation needs to be seamless and it needs to be connected. So your fare from BART should roll to your fare to Caltrain, should roll to your fare to Muni.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Spur's working on all that stuff. At least the plan for it. So
yeah. The people that live on the west side, I mean, maybe their neighborhood is very different from Hayes Valley. They didn't go through the same gentrification that my grandmother saw.
Right.
But their reasons around being cautious about housing, I think, are similar.
Yeah.
And there's also been a big push to only make it affordable, which I think there's a lot of merit to, but it ends up also pricing out a lot of middle class families, which we've really lost in San Francisco.
Totally lost. Like, I think, again, like, I lived in England, which is quasi-social. It's not a socialist, not a socialist country, it's quasi. So that means that my friend whose parents were doctors, he lived in their brownstone, and next to him was a teacher. And on the other side of him was a single mother on Section 8 or, in equivalent to Section 8 in England. Mm-hmm. So the neighborhoods in England, because of the structure, are very economically mixed. And we need to encourage integration and economically mixed housing in San Francisco as well. Mm-hmm. But the middle class definitely needs to be paid attention to, because those are all of our teachers, all of our first responders, and people like that. So.
Right. Yeah, let's get back to Black people.
Yeah, let's get back to Black people, man. I don't know.
Yeah, because
you can't unring a bell.
Right. I think the city. I mean, what do you think about the idea of the city having a Black agenda?
I think that's a lot of political theater.
Okay.
And I'm very aware of political theater. A lot of stuff going on right now is political theater. And to people, most people don't pay attention to politics. I do.
Right.
So the Black agenda is something Gavin Newsom first, or from my understanding, he put together a whole committee to put this Black agenda forward, and they codified it in this like booklet, and it's really it's really good actually. Mm-hmm. And then he left office. He moved on to another office, and there was no funding for implementation. So I know now they have a new racial equity department at the Human Rights Commission. So let's hope they get the funding to actually implement something that's already created. I don't want any more committees on Black life.
Right.
The fact of the matter is we're also under 4% right now. Mm-hmm. And that means that we don't have political might and we don't have political money to really get the city to pay attention to us in a real way.
Right.
So we definitely need coalition building. I know people hear that word, but to me, the mission and the brown community is a great coalition to have with the Black community to help us have a little more weight.
Right.
But I'm interested to see what this new department is going to do, see if they're get funding to implement some of these great ideas. Mm-hmm. And regrowing the Black population is going to be a challenge, because you have to ask yourself, if I'm a Black person in the middle class, why would I want to live in San Francisco? There's no socialization here. There's no amenities. If you have a family, you're going to home. Can you help them get a home?
Right.
So it's a very complicated issue at this point at 4%.
Yeah. Or you're trying to move into 500 square foot condo for $700,000.
Exactly. No, let me tell you, culturally, Black people have kids and we have families, and it's a cultural thing. It's very similar to Latino culture. We need space for that. Mm-hmm. And so having these micro units, which is a big thing now, which I think is needed, but I mean, most people are going to outgrow that in no time. Right.
Yeah. So then there's this thing about, there's a lot of maybe pomp and circumstance about the idea of a Black agenda, but there are actual changes to process on how to do business in the city that could help people that are Black, right? Like what would it be? What would it look like if it were like real? Like what's a tangible change?
I know the PUC is going to have 50% of its workforce retiring from the wastewater treatment plant in the Bayview. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many years, but quick, it's soon. And so they need a lot of workforce development to train, to get people ready. And so I know Harlan Kelly's doing a lot to recruit Black talent. And I think that's a great start. I think that's a great model. But then once you recruit the Black talent to the city, what's going to keep them here? What's going to keep them from working in the city and living in Dublin or Antioch or Oakland? And that's housing. That's quality of life. That's schools. That's a place to go. So your kid is not the only Black kid in the classroom being like ostracized or having to deal with that. So in addition to workforce development opportunities, the city has to really pay attention to, other amenities that will support Black life. And I know people say, I forgot the saying, but basically like what helps Black people helps all people. So if you can figure that out for Black people in the middle class, it's going to really be a paradigm for all the middle class. Yeah. But we're talking about Black folk first.
Yeah, we talking. Very intentional. We on the topic. So I want to talk to you about leadership, because you are one of our, I think, a celebrated leaders just as a San Franciscan, not just a Black leader, but a leader just in the city, a black female leader, which is important. How do you think about leadership? Like, what is your leadership approach?
I'm very big on, before I decided to run for office, because even years ago, people asked me would I run for office, but I didn't feel I had a body of work. I feel like a lot of people run for office and they are social media warriors. They complain a lot on Facebook and they say all the right things, but really they've not shown any ability to produce, to organize, to show outcome of anything. So why would I trust them to run my city or run my neighborhood? So my biggest thing initially, if I were to run in the future, is I want to really show people that I've done the work, that I've built something, that I can show quantitative measures. That is very important to me. Of any leader I support, I want to see that background. Also, I want to know that I want to know what community you're serving. I want to know where you hang out. I want to know like that balance. I don't want to see you just hanging at like galas and dinner parties. I want to see that you're really a grassroots person. So those are some of the things I hope to model. And also like I hope to see in the leadership I support. Okay.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about was legacy. And so, when I started a consulting firm named after my great grandfather. He's a person I mentioned that bought the house on Oak Street. It's called the Luther Harris Holding Company. And this is his dictionary.
Oh yeah.
And this is my great grandmother's chairs. And, he had like an 8th grade education. He came to San Francisco. He passed with like several properties. He built a sawmill in Arkansas, all at a time before Black people could vote, legally vote in the country, or before the Civil Rights Act passed, which actually made it real for the community. How do you think about your legacy?
I always said to myself, like, I'm not from San Francisco, so I don't have family here. So, the recession is upon us, things happen. And if for any reason I have to leave San Francisco, I wanted to be a part of making Bayview a Black cultural district, which I helped co-author the legislation. And I want Bayview Live to live on and be like basically a mini Outside Lands on the Southeast sector. And if I leave and those two things are thriving, the cultural district and the festivals, I'm happy. So that's kind of what that's obviously as I grow politically, and my vision of that may become bigger in terms of legacy. But I know like that's what I hope to leave imprinted on San Francisco.
Imprint.City. So how can I learn more about your DCCC campaign?
Yeah, so you can go to Tyra Fennell, SF as in sanfrancisco.com to learn about my DCCC campaign. Also like me on Facebook, Tyra Fennell for DCCC. Because I do a myriad of my policy positions, things I've done. Obviously, I like photos, so on my Facebook page. So that's a little more fun than just my website. But go to my website, tyrafennellsf.com, or Tyra Fennell for DCCC on Facebook, or Tyra Imprint on Instagram.
Okay. Thank you, Tyra.
Thank you.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yay.
So, peace, and thank you for listening to another Cook on Monday Morning podcast. I'd like to thank Tyra Fennell for being our second guest on the show. This has been really fun to do. I look forward to having a range of different types of people talking about all that they do, whether it's in San Francisco, in some other city, interesting topics that I hope will inform and inspire you to have a different approach to how you view your week. We want to change what it means to what you think about a Monday morning. And so thank you. This podcast really started with a newsletter that I distribute every Monday morning called Cook on Monday Morning. You can subscribe to that podcast at StevonCook.com. Please also feel free to share this podcast or the first one or whichever content on the website or on YouTube that you think is appropriate to the people that you think would benefit from it. You know, I don't really believe in the like and subscribe and comment game. I'm not really in there for that. But hopefully if the content is good, you feel compelled to, share it with people that you think will benefit from it. Now, if you are a person that's interested in creating your own podcast, reach out to me at info@StevonCook.com. We can help you set up the audio and video for your show. I'm producing this myself, but I really want to be a resource for others that may not have had the equipment or the technical expertise to create something on their own. So if that's of interest to you, reach out to me at info@StevonCook.com. If you are interested in working with me through my consulting practice, I started a consulting business. It's a small boutique company. I named it after my great-grandfather. It's called the Luther Harris Holding Company. And I focus on strategic advising to help companies meet different business objectives that they have, whether it's around community engagement, strategic growth, brand awareness, etc. So you can also reach out to me regarding that at info@StevonCook.com. Now, finally, I just want to thank the people that made this podcast possible. I want to thank our videographer, David, for all of his great work. I want to thank Fernando and Cinco Marquez for the editing that he does for the podcast. I want to thank Tyra again, who is our host today, or our guest today. Finally, I want to say a general thank you to all the people who I think make San Francisco the incredible place that it is. From our people that teach our students, that drive our buses, that keep our streets safe, our fire service, our garbage collectors, everybody that helps the city run. Thank you for the work you do. I am your biggest fan. I want to see you thrive, grow, and I don't think you're appreciated enough. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you that do that work as well. If there are particular guests or topics that you want me to cover, please let me know. You can obviously view the podcast on YouTube, but it's also on Spotify and wherever else you listen to podcasts. So again, I look forward to taking this journey with you. Thank you for listening and have a great week. Peace, and we out.